All right, peace and blessings, family. Welcome to another episode of the Prolific Perspectives Podcast. Today I have a special guest filming on location, brother Kareem Young, also known as Yawo or Ya Bile. Brother, man, it's been a long time coming. I appreciate you, brother. Welcome to the podcast.
Filthy.
Today's topic is business and the power of spirituality within business. So, speaking off camera, was chopping it up about, your familial background and your history with business and how it was kind of inspired by a tradition within your family. So, for the people out there checking out this particular podcast, man, can you kind of let the people know about, your history and how you, got exposed or brought up in the entrepreneurship business background?
So I have to give honor and respect to my ancestors first and foremost. And of course the extension of their ancestors who are my elders, and in this case, my parents. So we moved to Florida back in the 80s. And one of the more progressive things that my mother did was when we moved to a neighborhood. We were very specific about the neighborhood we moved to. So at that time, it was a low-income neighborhood.
Okay.
And we were very specific because we come from a family of service. So once we came to the neighborhood here in Tampa, Florida, we moved from New Jersey. Mm-hmm. One of the first things that we did was situate ourselves in a neighborhood that allowed for us that as years go by, one of the more progressive things that my mother did, along with my dad, was they continued to purchase property as it became available. So you started seeing, Miss Maddie next door, she transitioned. Her son doesn't want to keep the property. So
gotcha.
They put in a bid for those things, and what it ended up doing was we captured a lot of property in the area that we grew up in the neighborhood, our neighborhood. So that put me on the path and put us in a good trajectory to where now, a lot of what I know about business was backbone and anchored by real estate. Of course, even when I was a teenager, we would do a lot of property management for the sake of people who would rent it out. And that really was the basis and the foundation for what I would do later on in life. So
that's what's up. What's up. So it's like you pretty much grew up seeing firsthand the power in investing in real estate, mm-hmm. and it's been beneficial throughout your family. I find that to be very powerful because a lot of people these days, there's a lot of us out here now that's never owned a property, let alone several. And so based off of how you brought up your upbringing, if I'm not mistaken, so your family now controls about how many houses on this particular block?
Well, we own an entire block which consists of 5 houses between my brothers, my parents, and myself.
Okay.
But then we own directly on the back side of it. We have a couple more properties where my uncle, my niece, my nephew. We own a couple properties on the next block over. So I was fortunate to be a part of the mindset that said, we're not gonna go and run out to chase the Joneses.
Right.
We're gonna maintain homestead in this space. It has not been an easy trek.
Right.
And of course I said we moved here in the 80s, so we all understand what the impact of crack cocaine was in the hood.
Absolutely.
And we've had some very trying times, but now when you start looking at gentrification in a lot of urban core areas, mm-hmm. you start seeing why a lot of people move to those areas, because it's a low price point to come in.
Right.
Most cases they go ahead and increase the value of the home by upgrading it.
Right.
But I really believe that gentrification in and of itself is something that some of us are to blame, because we go ahead and sell what Big Mama actually accomplished.
Right.
And you know, and one of the issues that we ran into was that a lot of times maybe our generations before, or excuse me, generations after, was going to look for the greener grass on the other side of the railroad track.
Right,
and that wasn't always the case.
Right.
And so as we move out into the more urban areas, excuse me, into the more suburban areas, the gentrification came to the urban areas.
Right. Right.
And when it came to the urban areas, what we see was that a lot of the accomplishments of the previous generations were erased.
Mm.
And I think everyone who's had some elders, whether there be the grandparents who had land anywhere,
Right.
I think we're somewhat to blame for those properties getting removed from the family and building a certain type of legacy that was already started previously. So
Right.
we had those conversations about, we have examples of those ancestors who did what it is that we're trying to redo now.
Right.
And that's to be able to get generational wealth from, at least from, in my perspective, is from real estate. So
Right.
it's so important to understand the accomplishments of what your elders and your ancestors have already accomplished. So that was very important.
Right. Like the power of Sankofa,
Yes.
you know, reaching back and bringing forth, you know, the lessons in the systems from the past. I think, and that's powerful. I feel like so many of us, like I said, haven't even had the opportunity to purchase the first home, but for your family to control multiple properties, you know, within this one block, within this one area, that's powerful within itself. And then also, you know, we talk about the center, which, as a matter of fact, can you kind of share a little bit about the center?
So we have a community center that we acquired from the Department of Transportation. So the Department of Transportation, let's go back to when the interstate system was created.
Okay.
The interstate system was created to mimic a lot of what we saw in Europe with a lot of fast-moving, large movements of product, military equipment through a particular location. So we built the actual interstate system here.
Okay.
But if you start looking around the nation and you start understanding where they place those interstate systems, a lot of those interstate systems were right down Main Street of a lot of our ancestors' neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
So what you have here is no different than around the nation, to where a lot of poor and quote unquote minority communities had their communities decimated by the fact that the interstate system was put right through the middle of it. Mm. So what we did was reclaim one of those properties from the Department of Transportation. My mother was the champion of that, and it was boarded up. It was, you know, we had vagrants and, you know, who knows what was going on at the property.
Right.
But we took that property and along with the community that she deals with and a lot of the volunteers, we actually built that building up. It was an old church. Mm-hmm. And it was right next to the interstate. And now it is a community center. We have early childhood development. We have after school programs. We also have also along the interstate, mm-hmm. but directly 300 yards north, there's a community garden also there. And we also have events at that space. And we just acquired another property, another commercial property just about 2 miles north, directly in front of the housing project here, okay. The last housing project here in Tampa, which is Robles Park. Mm-hmm. But we've always continuously kept our eyes and our fingers on the pulse of real estate. And when you do that, I think it gives you this ability to really understand, you know, where the resources come in order to build wealth.
Right, right.
Nowadays, we have a lot of different situations with the economy post-COVID. We also have, of course, you see where where the feds are increasing a lot of the
interest rates.
Yeah. And that affects us. But even before that, the other part of gentrification that I say is not necessarily in the hands of our ancestors was things like redlining by a lot of the banks.
Oh, yeah.
To where when it comes to the fact that, you know, and I tell people anytime I do any type of consultation is, before you sell that house, let's see if you can qualify to refinance it. And we haven't had the same rates. We haven't had the same points that a lot of other people were able to have. So that helped the gentrification also.
Absolutely.
And so what we started seeing was a lot of the properties in our neighborhood that were just being removed, the families, the anchoring of those families were being removed. But, you know, we made a lot of sacrifices to be able to gather residential real estate. Of course, we actually acquired the center that you have. We have another center also. But it was all predicated on finding a way to contrast the gentrification of the area, of course. Mm-hmm. And so we made some, like I said, we had to make some real tough decisions in order to maintain that. And what I mean when I say tough decisions is, you know, you may not go on that holiday excursion,
right? Because
you actually have to repair the plumbing in one of the properties.
Right.
You may have a property that has been trashed by a former tenant.
Right.
You may have to remove the tenant from the property. Those are all of some of the tougher decisions that you have to make, but we've always been about community. We've always been about making sure that our community had at least somewhere to lay their head, because we know how important that is just for the development of the children, the sanity of the family.
Right.
So, you know, those are some of the things that we had to commit ourselves to for some years now, for some decades.
Right.
Now, actually.
That's powerful, man. Yeah. That's powerful. Now, it's just so much to unpack in just that whole answer within itself. But what I'm gonna do, I want to switch lanes to get into the spirituality aspect of how entrepreneurship, you know, has been a staple in your life, and then I want to kind of go back to, you know, united we stand, divided we fall, the whole community and aspect, and into a cultural aspect once we start within the community. But in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of business ownership, you also had a successful career as a coach. So, but then you got a revelation that kind of steered you in the direction to go on full-blown entrepreneur, full-blown business owner. So can you kind of, just for the sake of letting people know how life kind of unfolds or life happens, you know, can you kind of go into the success that you had and what industry, you know, or what, you know, as a coach, and then kind of how the revelation came to switch paths and switch lanes to where you are now? Yeah,
sure. Great question. So we would have to give some historical context to bring it back to today.
Okay.
So I worked in corporate America for a Fortune 500 company in IT previous to coaching.
Okay.
And I played college sports, and I always was, I guess, I understood what coaches were teaching us. So I had gotten 3 separate phone calls from previous coaches to go into strength and conditioning and or coaching football. And I said no until the 3rd time because I was making some pretty good money in corporate America. At that time I had moved to Atlanta, which I still have a property there. But I ended up going into coaching, which I loved the coaching because I love being able to touch, the athletes directly, and at the same time having outcomes that you could measure. Right. And that was so important to do. Right. But about 10 years ago, I got my first EFI reading, and I just come into EFI and understanding exactly, I always had a good context of African spirituality, but there was this missing aspect of participating in it. So, you know, it was this intellectual interaction with it, but at the same time, didn't necessarily know or understand how, or even have the outlets to know how you wanted to participate with it.
Gotcha.
So I got my first reading, and I continued to get more readings after that. And by that time I was prepared to jump out of coaching, but at the same time, I understood that it was necessary for me to finish up what I started for the sake of a lot of the athletes who didn't have father figures,
Right.
who really were inside of a bubble and had no context of security or any example of maturation.
Gotcha.
So the E5 reading said, you know, your spiritual success and your financial success are wings of the same bird. And what ended up happening was I started realizing that spirituality was speaking directly to my finance. And one of the biggest things that I had to undo from my Western context of understanding things was that no, spirituality has to be over here and finance is over here. No. If I said they have to be together, in order for you to be successful, you had to do them at the same time. And that was a real big shift for me, because what I realized was how Western my mind was, how limiting I was with understanding what it meant to do two things at once that I otherwise assumed were so separate.
Right. Well, we're a product of our environments too. So.
Yes, yes. And so what ended up happening was I realized that the increase in my spiritual acumen increased my business acumen. And I realized that, and I'm saying only recent, I said 10 years ago, only in the last couple of years have I totally been able to grasp how those two things work together. And that's so important for me. And I'm not, and I'll say this, and I'm not necessarily saying that he is a hero of mine by any measures, but when I was going through this reconfiguring of what it meant to mold these two concepts that I otherwise thought were foreign together, I read a quote by J.P. Morgan. If some of you don't know who J.P. Morgan was, he was a banker who really started the Federal Reserve. But one of the things that he said that was so poignant was, and I think it was a conversation that he had with someone, was they had a conversation about astrology. And J.P. Morgan rebutted the comment. You know, they said millionaires don't use astrology. He said, no, millionaires don't use astrology. Billionaires do. And from that point, it really solidified that I wasn't the only one who had to bring together two somewhat foreign, seem to be foreign concepts. Right. But then it started getting me to look back at ancient Kemet and understanding that their priests were very well-rounded. You know, they didn't just do spirituality. In fact, a lot of the priests were the scientists. And so you start realizing that after 40 years, someone would become an actual full-fledged initiate, or someone who was a actually complete individual in Kemet. And they were studying biology, they were studying astrology, they were studying economics. They knew everything, basically.
Pretty much.
And so that really helped me to understand that, oh, I see that they're speaking about the same thing of merging these two worlds over here. And, oh yeah, my studies from ancient Kemet and understanding Kemet also reinforces what it is that I constantly kept on having brought in front of me. And I totally believe that when you have those reoccurring events, that those are from a spiritual orientation. You know, this is not by mistake that you keep on getting these things presented in front of you. And what I ran into was, I did something real good as a coach, but being able to actually do these things from a spiritual standpoint and not working for anybody was really closer to my genius than it was coaching and working for somebody. So I can't work for anybody in that capacity anymore. And you start seeing all of the trials and tribulations, and you know, the times where you would have to really start questioning your integrity into certain situations. I saw that firsthand. And I knew at that point, when it just came to an apex, that it was time for me to step out. And I think a lot of your viewers, especially those who are starting their own businesses, the pandemic gave everyone this really hard reset.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And I realize, and the reason why I keep on bringing up even the horror stories of managing properties is because you almost have to be able to recognize it and understand it as a part of your maturation. but you have to be able to use your spiritual system in order to understand how to navigate through those situations also.
Facts.
And it's really important because your ancestors and all your allied spirits, they're never not there. We just don't recognize them all the time. And every time, a person goes through things, they don't realize that they are supposed to remember and do Sankofa type of behavior in order to be able to pull from the past what's needed in order to work with what you have today. And it's so important. And that's where I think that spirituality has that merger point that, there's really nothing new under the sun.
Right.
It just comes in different forms. And
right.
inside of our DNA, and epigenetics also reinforces this now, is that the experiences that our ancestors had, there's a certain informational imprint inside of our DNA that some way or other we can tap into.
Preach, brother. Preach.
And a lot of times we look at things in a different context, like for instance, some type of quote unquote tragedy. And in a lot of cases, sometimes that strain that we have in life is proportionate to how much we have to change our direction in thinking.
Right.
And so what are these trials and tribulations? Are they really this bad thing, or is it really this space for us to be cracked open for something else to be put inside of us?
Right.
Really, really first for something to leak out of us.
Yeah.
And like I said, in my cases was trying to understand how two things that I thought were so foreign, spirituality and finances, were so distant in my mind.
Right.
But no, you have to get, metaphorically slapped in the face inside of corporate America to say, I don't need to be here anymore in this capacity. And a part of that trek has to deal with your ancestors, has to deal with your spirituality, has to deal with these archetypes that really tell you how to interact with phenomena that you believe is so, personal.
Right.
But it really is not.
Right.
So it begs the question, who am I? And what am I made up of?
Right.
And you start realizing that you're made up of an enormous amount of intelligence that our African spiritual systems allow for us to tap into to deal with everyday issues.
That's powerful. That's very powerful. And as you were speaking, the wheels was turning in my mind. And real quick for the viewers, because I know the goal is for this this channel to have diversity in terms of viewership, but when the word Kemet is being spoken, Kemet is Egypt, which most people would know it by in terms of societal norm. But Kemet is the name of Egypt in antiquity, the original name, and it stems from the word Kem, which is black, and Kemet means the land of the black. So it's no confusion, which the Western cultural civilization will have you to think that Egypt is outside of Africa, or that the so-called current Egyptians, or the people who are of Arabic descent who are in control of Egypt to a certain aspect, are the actual progenitors of Egypt, which is not true. Kemet is the land of the blacks, and you can see that through the hieroglyphs of all the ancestors that we have who are melanated, which was proven without a shadow of a doubt by Sheikh Anta Diop with his work. So just to kind of give a little insight on the word Kemet for those who don't know, that's what we're speaking of when we talk about Kemet. But to segue back to where we were at, clearly the audience can see that you're a man of pretty high intelligence and intellectual status, but can you kind of revert back to Atlanta? Because I know you said you still have a property in Atlanta, but can you kind of give me a little bit of insight on the significance of Clark University within your family line, and the relationships that are currently there, and how Clark University kind of played a role into the educational aspect of your family?
Sure. My brother, my eldest brother, Dr. Young, he is the head of the Department of Political Science there at Clark Atlanta University. I tell you, for me, what really resonates with me is my ability to really always go and reference my community. And what I mean by that is because my brother's there at Clark Atlanta University, I think it's important for the audience to understand your genius, because it allows you to be very effective in interacting with someone else whose genius is maybe different than yours. So I have an older brother to where my interaction with him is just always like this communication. Hey, this world event happened. Give me perspective on it.
Right.
And he does that with me also with finances, and also with a lot of the coaching that I've accomplished. But that's what our community is about. Our community is about understanding that everyone comes here with a certain genius, and usually either, you know, in different aspects of African spirituality, either you have a shaman who comes in and hears the whispers of the mother, and they find out what the baby is coming here to do. And the community sets up its structure in order to reinforce whatever it is that entity said that it was coming to the community to be able to actually do for the sake of ameliorating or improving the community. So I'm saying that to say that, being that my brother is a professor there, I'm so comfortable with having exchanges with him about things that I don't know much about, and knowing that that's his genius that he's serving, and it helps our community. And this is one of the things that you're doing, is to be able to capture all of these different elements to educate a lot of your audience in order to say, well, this is where you are today, but if you need a resource to be able to understand these things better, because you will run into some trials and tribulations, almost anticipated.
Absolutely.
But how do you go back and reference those who are able to maybe know a little bit more about it, to be able to walk you through just a stage that you all automatically that you couldn't automatically get past.
Right.
And that's so important. But my brother, he owns a house here, directly about 4 houses over from where we're sitting at right now.
Okay.
And so he's back and forth. But what we also do is that we take students on college tours. Like I said, we live right here next to the public housing, and we take children from the public housing who can see my brother in a capacity at Clark Atlanta University.
That's powerful.
But he also lives right down the same street.
That's powerful.
And to be able to really reconfigure the experiences that our youth has, that's so important, because no one can take that away from them. They have these experiences of going to somewhere else, and we don't just take them on college tours. We actually tour the city to where if they actually get into the school, they understand that a lot of the connections that they have with people will be at that school, and understand if they can live there, if they can visualize themselves there. So that's really important for us to connect the dots. And my brother's in the community as well as being up there, and he travels back and forth a lot.
Right.
And I still have a property up there. I Airbnb the property.
Right.
It's my first property that I ever purchased myself. And a lot of times those things are improved. Those issues of fear are improved by just knowing someone who has an expertise level that can help you. That's really important. We are a community-oriented people, but we have to remove our egos away from saying, and I just believe that the universe is there to reinforce you giving information. It comes back in some other form.
It sure does.
And so I give consultations. I also do a lot of investing. I help people to invest in different avenues. But I'm so comfortable with the spiritual aspect of self that you do those things without saying, well, where's the dollar that you give me? It may be that, and there's sometimes that Ifa says that you can't do work for somebody.
Right.
Unless you're getting money.
Right.
There's other times where you are to give whatever your resources are to someone, because you don't know who's doing what,
right,
and how it comes back in full circle with you. So
right,
those are some of the aspects of it.
Nah, that's powerful, man, and I can tell right now for those listening, this is gonna be a much longer show than normal because I feel the energy, and I feel I feel like with the reaction or the response of what people can get out of this show, including myself. But I love the community orientation, the community, the established commitment to community empowerment. I love that. And one of the things you said that brought me back to my childhood, which I love what you guys are doing, not just with the center, which we'll go further in depth with in the center, but even based off of having your brother being who and what he is at Clark, but still being here in the center of the community, and then giving the youth and our children the opportunity to see him in both environments, to see the level of polarities of what he is able to attribute to the community and to the university. But one of the things that you said that really stuck out to me, man, that really brought me back home, and shout out to my Uncle Al from Springfield, Massachusetts, where I'm originally from. But to be able to see somebody as a child and be able to look up to them and see them as successful. And the reason I say that is, shout out to my uncle. My Uncle Al was who I saw, you know what I'm saying, as the successful brother. And as a young man, I remember seeing him. He had a phenomenal career as a manager for Pratt & Whitney, the company that makes airplane parts, right? But also, he owned his own barbershop, and Six Corner Barbershop. Shout out to Six Corner Barbershops back home. He just received an award for, I think, 40 years in business with the barbershop. But I say all that to say that you talk about configurations and the ability to manipulate what we see and how we respond. I, as a child, was able to see that I don't have to wake up and go work a job for somebody in order to equate that to success. I don't have to make it to the league. I don't have to be a rapper. I don't have to do anything. I wanted to make it playing basketball, but life didn't send me on that path because of decisions that I made. However, seeing somebody from a child who was able to create their own without the need of having to work. He didn't have to work for that company, but he chose to. But he had his own. He built his own from the ground up, and 40 years later, he's still in business with the barbershop. I was able to see that I can create my own. I was able to see that this is possible because I know it's possible because I'm seeing him do it. And so I commend you and your brother and everybody who's playing a role in the center of being able to give our children the opportunity to see that just because we're raised or brought up in a certain environment don't mean that we're limited to it, and that it is possible for us to achieve success on our own, you know, for us. And I think that's powerful, man, for you guys to be exposing the youth to that.
So one of the things that I do, my approach, and all of us have different approaches, is whenever I have a lot of the neighborhood youths, I involve them in even some of the business decisions I have to make. So for instance, one of the things that we had is when we bought the north side property, which is directly opposite of the other property, we purchased a commercial building that was a store. A Korean fella who owned the store was retiring. He didn't want any of the products that were in the store at that time. So we had to figure out a way, because we weren't into it to sell products,
right?
Convenience store products. So we brought the children inside, and we actually paid them to do inventory to figure out, how much of everything that we had. We also worked with the University of South Florida, and we actually had their business department. Well, a lot of times I go out and I speak to the classes. And they came out and they did an assessment of our children doing the inventory, and our children presented to them, well, this is the size of this thing, and we're selling it 50 cents per ounce for this. So I think what's important for our youth is to really take them through some of the financial processes that sometimes we even feel embarrassed about. It needs to no longer be taboo for you to involve your children. My son knows exactly how much each mortgage is on every single house.
That's powerful.
He understands exactly how much rent is currently, maybe not to the point that he needs to clearly put it into action,
right?
But he has an idea. And so what I think is real important for our youth is to really become the parents needs to become the student if they haven't already mastered whatever it is that they're looking to master.
Right.
But also, at the same time, as you learn, teach. as you learn teaching, if you could consistently be able to say, you know what, and I've done this, I messed up on this deal, son, and this is how much money I lost.
Right. Involving our children with economics and budgeting, and as you stated just now, unfortunately for us in the melanated community, the African community, a lot of us look at and view finances as taboo. So, you were sharing how you have involved the children from the center with, being able to create and calculate inventory with the store that you acquire, as well as with your son being able to be knowledgeable on how much mortgages cost, how much rent you're able to make with the investment properties and the Airbnbs. So let me ask you this before we go all the way into it: why do you feel that us as a community do view speaking about finances with our children, or just in general? I think some of us are not even comfortable speaking amongst ourselves about finances. But why do you think that is? And then how can we combat that? And then let's just get into the significance of involving our children with finances.
So my take on why it's taboo is that it's unprocessed trauma. Whether it is unprocessed trauma when it comes to economics or family or spirituality, and if it's unprocessed, that trauma relives itself the moment that you speak about it. So what I believe happens with a lot of our elders is there are certain things that they're not prepared to deal with at those moments. Because they're still just figuring it out. They're trying to figure and work themselves through that. One of the jewels that I think is missed at that moment, though, is for them to see a point of reference, at least of how someone dealt with their adversity that they more than likely might have to deal with also. And so I think it's important for us to be able to walk with our children through things, and I say that not to a point to where we overindulge them into certain things, because that's the other end of the spectrum. Some of our parents expose their children to too many things. And I think that there's a fine balance in between not speaking about some of the issues that you have to deal with, that, and more than likely, your children are going to have to deal with it as being adults that are financial, but at the same time, not putting too much weight on your children with the information to where they lose their childhood and they have to almost activate themselves as adults before their time.
I agree.
So I think unresolved trauma forces people to have to relive things, and so they don't want to involve their children. Another aspect of this, whether it be finances or spirituality, is understanding what the message of adversity has for you. What is the message that it has for you? We know in the Yoruba context that this is the marketplace, that this is not home. Orun is home. We only come here to the marketplace. Well, in the marketplace, there's a lot of bartering and there's a lot of going back and forth and negotiation. And some of that, you have a personal understanding of what you think a price of a thing is. I'm speaking metaphorically.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just for those, like I said, some people might be from different aspects. Can you just break down Orun for those who don't know, and then the marketplace, just to kind of give the clarity of the context?
So Orun is what is considered the unseen realm in the Yoruba context. Liken it somewhat to heaven, but not necessarily the case. Aye is the earth, is the tangible earth of where we are. And what is understood is that from a spiritual context, your Ori goes and it is manifested into the physical plane of existence. And when you come to this physical plane, it is seen as a marketplace. And of course, when you go out into any marketplace, there's a lot of bartering going back and forth. And in a lot of cases, sometimes you have a context of what you think you should either pay for something or what you should buy or what you should sell something for. And, negotiation could be traumatizing sometimes in that context. Now, this is a metaphor for life, but it's specific and it's kind of, you know, right up the alley of economics too.
Right.
Well, our children have to see, just like you saw your Uncle Ray, Uncle Al,
Yep.
Do certain things for a certain duration of time. This is that level of information that is transferred generation after generation to from elder to youth,
Right.
because that they know that they're giving them valuable information. Now, you know, a lot of the audience may think, well, you know, that may not apply to today. Our understanding of time is not linear, as if people are walking away from us generation after generation. We're more of a cyclical understanding of things,
Right.
to where when that cycle comes back close to it, it's a little bit further, but it's real similar enough for you to look back at it and understand what did Uncle Al do
Right.
in this situation, which helps you in your situation.
Right.
And that's the approach that we use with our children. And the children's experiences are things that you can never take away from them. A lot of times, and what's important for us to do as the elders in the community is to give them specific context
Right.
on what's going on, what the issue is, what are the possibilities to resolve the issue, and what it is that I did in order to be able to resolve this issue. So we had, in just this specific case, we had a purchase of a building. We want to transform this building from a convenience store into a community center, but we have product that we don't want.
Right.
So what are we going to do in order to be able to get rid of this product? Well, we didn't know how much anything cost. You know, we just knew that we had all of these things product, and they weren't labeled with any prices. And we actually utilized a lot of the community and the other volunteers from, like I said, University of South Florida, to find out how do we move from this reality to another reality and bring the children along inside of that trek. It's so important.
Can I ask a quick question as you were telling the story? Now, so this was after the acquisition of the store. So that means he sold you all the property and all the goods and everything with it.
Left it there. He said he's going golfing now. He's done.
I got you. That's yours now. Everything is yours. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I didn't mean to throw you off.
No, you
so,
did.
Okay. So okay, go ahead. I was just curious.
Sure.
Okay, about that part.
So what I'm saying is that a part of us maturing our children has everything to do with getting them prepared for situations. Getting them prepared for situations that allow for them to have a context on how to respond to it. Because I remember my mother always talking to me about when she took my brother to college the first year, and they had a family dinner with all of the incoming freshmen, and she overheard the interactions between, I think it was a lawyer and their child. And what they were speaking about was to get him prepared for what he should anticipate in life, but also within the next 4 years of his life, right? And they were already having this conversation, and he was 18 years old.
Wow.
And so when those things happen to the child, and we almost got to anticipate that certain things happen to our children, it's our job to get them prepared for them.
Right.
So why not get them prepared for certain things that they're going to more than likely have to deal with from an economic standpoint.
Right.
You know, if you got to make the decision to drive this car that costs this much for a monthly payment, you're going to have insurance, or you're going to buy a used car, you're going to lease a vehicle,
Right.
you're going to purchase a house. What's the difference between purchasing a house and renting? What's the difference between paying a mortgage and paying rent? What's the difference between paying a mortgage and maybe buying broke down car because you do have a mortgage?
Right.
These circumstances and situations we have to continue to involve our children in. And I'm not afraid to say, these are some of the things that I had to deal with. I've been in the stock market. I've lost money. I think I've lost. I think I've exactly right. I've gained money, but we got to tell these stories because we need to prepare and insulate those who we love or those who we work with collectively on the impact and the possibilities of investing.
Right.
No, if anyone comes to you and tells you that your investment is 100% secure, run away quickly.
Yeah, they full of it.
Everything has its risks.
Yeah.
So it's important for us to be able to discuss these things amongst each other to say, yeah, I've lost over 6 figures twice in the stock market. I've lost, in 2008, we had a bubble for the real estate bubble. I bought a house just down the street. Again, we start talking about how great it is that we have a lot of the houses in the community. Well, I bought a house for $205,000 at that time. By the time 2008 was over, I had to release it for $47,000.
And I'm glad you brought that up, man, because I was gonna, before you even brought that up, it's so crazy that you brought that up, because when you said we need to make our children aware of, the risks, in terms of investing or in terms of business or anything really. But I personally, like you said, I lost money in the stock market, and I did the same thing. I bought my first property actually in 2007, and I bought a steal, foreclosure, 160,000, and appraised at 255. So it automatically in my mind, I'm like, yo, I'm about to do a home equity line in this joint. I'm gonna pull out this 100,000 equity. I'm gonna go buy me 2 or 3 rentals, and I'm about to get it popping.
Yes.
And then I dealt with something extremely similar to you. So I say that to say this, because I learned a lot of lessons from that. But what is the mindset that we must adopt to be able to plow through adversity, not quit, not give up, but adapt? What is the mindset that you say that you had to adapt and that you would recommend for the children and the listeners to adapt in order to make it through those types of losses? When you talk about losing 6 figures twice, when you talk about losing the almost 180,000 on the property, what mindset did you have to develop to make sure that you still was able to go unscathed and to continue to do what you do in business and not let that beat you down and keep you down?
So I'm a coach by trade, and I'll give you one of the adages that they give to, let's say, equestrians, people who are learning to ride a horse.
Okay.
If you fall off the horse 7 times, the last time that you actually get on, the last thing that you have to do is actually get on the horse the 8th time. If you fall off of it the 8th time, then the last thing that you have to do is get on the horse the 9th time. If you fall off at the 9th time, and so on and so forth.
I like that though.
But what it does, it puts the context of the trauma of falling off the horse into perspective. That's not the last stage of what it is that I'm doing. So there's a certain resiliency that you have to have. But resiliency, I think, is reinforced by gaining information. So I work with a lot of athletes.
Right.
And if you don't know what to do, purchase information.
Oh yeah.
Purchase information. If you purchase information, it helps you to understand how to maneuver. The next thing is to understand the collective reaction to certain things. A lot of times we feel traumatized on things that are economic, that are happening to everyone. They're happening to not just you.
Yeah.
So you're not just a person who has come to a point of failure. Everyone has.
Right.
And that's what happened in 2008.
Oh yeah.
A lot of fingers were being pointed, but it impacted the society as a whole. So then you start realizing that this is not something that is just specific to me.
Right.
And I believe that helps. But at the same time, you got to know before you go into any investment, what's your exit strategy, but more importantly, what's the worst case scenario going into this situation? What's the worst case scenario going into a situation, and are you prepared to deal with that worst case scenario? If you're okay to deal with that worst case scenario, then by all means go ahead and move forward with expectations that the best case scenario comes out. But there's a certain resiliency that you have to have. There are very few people who always have an upward trajectory and success.
Right.
A lot of times inside of these, motivational speaking and everything, we only focus on those. That's just to get you motivated.
Right.
I used to coach and I used to say, I'm not a motivator, I'm a facilitator. That you have to come to me with your motivation. I'll show you how to apply it in the right direction. And that's important for us to understand that the trek for financial freedom is not like this, is like
Yeah.
And you got to be prepared for that. But
That's
what
facts.
helps you with the banking of those sweeps and turns is information.
Facts.
It's information first, and it's also understanding the bigger picture on, is this just me? Am I the only one making this or having this happen to me?
Right.
Because then you start seeing things in a more general sense that is not specific to you. And I
Right.
think when you see things that are not specific to you, you maneuver a little bit different, because you're also seeing, when it's from a collective standpoint, well, what did you do because you got that answer wrong? And you look over to them and you say, oh, you put that, okay, I did the same mistake, but I did this and I did that.
Right.
You find the solution. So when I worked inside of corporate America, and I won't name the company, but we were in IT, one of the biggest computer companies in the world at the time. Anytime we had an issue, we did a RCA, which is called a root cause analysis.
Okay.
And we spent more time on understanding what went wrong than we did on the solution, because we realized that what went wrong really tells us, number one, how can we fix things to make our processes better.
Okay.
And we have to be able to do that in our own lives. A lot of people aren't really ready to sit down and be truly transparent with themselves.
That's facts.
When adversity comes.
That's
But
facts.
we have to do that. We have to understand, if you even looking at it right before you get into it. So when adversity does come, you say, maybe I wasn't supposed to expect that from the beginning. Maybe I needed to understand the risks.
Right.
And anytime you go invest inside of a stock, they give you something called a prospectus. And that prospectus tells all the information of the company and the organization in real small letters down at the bottom. It tells you and it outlines the risk of investing. So as we start looking at freedoms, financial freedoms, we got to understand the risks. And you got to be able to really hedge whatever it is that could possibly happen with something that is almost contradictory or countering to what you're getting ready to do.
Right.
And that may sound a little bit complicated, but we can
Nope.
talk about that a little bit more later on.
Well, no, as you're saying that, and not to interrupt, but literally as you're saying that, in my mind, I can see that's the equivalent of when you pick up a pack of cigarettes. You want to get your smoke on, but you got that little fine line, where it says the risks that come along with cigarettes. So I think that to really, just kind of break it down for people, like, to get people to get it. You know what I mean?
And the thing is that you have to take time out to read. One of the things that I was taught by my elders is that you don't sign anything that you haven't read. And a lot of times we get into, and I've been guilty of this.
Right.
We sign because we don't have a lot of time. We sign because we want to hurry up and get this other bill paid. So we sign this, or we sign because we're excited. We sign because we set the date for our vacation already. And those are constraints that we have put on ourselves as far as how soon something has to happen. And that level of interaction with reality is because we put the time stopwatch on ourselves. So take your time, read through certain things, because when you read through certain things, you find out so much information.
Right.
And especially when someone is there to, oh no, that just says ...
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Thank you for telling me,
Right.
but just let me read through it real
that's
quickly.
right.
And you start forming questions that you otherwise never would have formed, and you start having certain open dialogue with the people that you're dealing with financially. And I think that's most important in order to move forward. And even if you need some time, a lot of our elders would always say, let me sleep on it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And what they were really tapping into is this ability to go beyond this physical realm of existence, to tap into side of some other form of intelligence to help them with their decision making. And if you start looking at African tradition, dream space was very important.
I'm thinking Black Panther. As you're saying
Yes,
that, think about
exactly right.
when T'Challa went to see the ancestors in the ancestral realm. That's a real thing.
Yeah, and I think it's important to do that in the financial aspect, to just chill out for a minute.
Yeah.
Give yourself a moment to really absorb what's going on, really look at the risks that are involved, and really allow for another aspect of self to be able to come in and give a certain level of intelligence. And I think that's one of the reasons why our spirituality is so important. Our meditative space, that the moments of just being quiet, because you may have already said, I'm going to try to make a decision on something. And in a lot of cases, at least for me, when I release that idea of making that decision, and for me, one of the spaces for me is in the shower.
Gotcha.
When I'm in the shower, you know, all kind of revelations hit me.
Yeah.
When I wake up first thing in the morning, all kind of clarity I have hits me. And so I think giving yourself enough time, gathering the information helps with the risk, but risks are there. They're going to be there. And for me, in the past, if something sounds too good to be true, do some research, but more than likely it is.
Right.
There's not really a lot of overnight success. They are there,
right,
but not a lot of them.
Right.
You know, and those are outliers and not always the norm. But those are things that I think helps to deal with the trauma or the adversity that we deal with financially, spiritually, in our daily lives.
Right.
Is really, really looking in the mirror, but also finding as much information and really giving yourself time to formulate your position going into something.
That's powerful. And as you were saying that, like, what you said, it was RCA? That was
root cause analysis.
Root cause analysis, and the other one that I'm familiar, I wasn't familiar with that one, but the SWOT analysis.
Yes.
Doing a SWOT analysis with your strengths, your weaknesses, your obstacles, and your threats. I think that's a good way for us. That's really from a personal and business perspective, which I'm sure you're familiar with. But with that being said, I want to kind of get into how significant spirituality is or how significant spirituality has been for you with overcoming adversity financially.
So for me, a lot of times when we have an aspect of interacting with intelligence, and it's called divination. And around the world, you have people who have different ways of interacting with this intelligence. And I think it's important to where the questions are so important inside of divination sessions. When you really sit down and you analyze, what is it that I need to know in order to be able to move forward? I think the questions are so important. And a lot of times with some of my students that I've worked with, asking the real pertinent questions. A lot of things we have in our mind that really it wastes our time at those moments. So asking the questions are so important. But how does divination help? For me, when I understand my bigger picture within
spirituality over adversity. Okay. You were saying divination plays a major role in having the ability to overcome adversity.
Yeah. I think one of the more important things to do when approaching any adversarial situation is to really identify the different parts. You know, who's the enemy or quote unquote enemy? Is there a victim involved? And is it getting worse? And what's the possible outcome going into it?
Okay.
Being able to assess things on the fly is something that even in the business world gives a certain level of success. And one of the descriptors that they utilize for most of the CEOs is emotional intelligence. And those questions that I just asked before gives you the ability to really understand a perspective that you're inside of. And one of the biggest issues that we have is not being able to see what's right in front of us because we're too close to it.
Oh yeah.
And what spirituality allows for you to do, whether it's in a business situation, is to back up and to look at this bigger picture from a bird's eye view and to be able to give you perspective. Now, a lot of people have different levels of spirituality. They have different religious contexts of dealing with reality. But adversity tests those moments to see if you are really committed to what it is that you say you believe or demonstrate or practice. And what specifically what divination in this context does for me, it gives me that bird's eye view of everything. And when you have that bird's eye view of everything, it's so important that you maneuver through these situations with a certain level of emotional intelligence. Now that term somewhat seems oxymoronic, because on one of them you have this more feminine energy, which is the emotions,
right.
And then on the other side you have a more masculine energy, which is intelligence.
Right.
But one of the things that I've learned through my spiritual trek is that we have to be able to tie these things in to have a balance to do anything, whether it's business, whether it's family, whether it's any type of experiential thing that we have inside of our existence. And so the questions are so important. A lot of times like I said, we're dealing with a certain level of trauma, and we don't understand that even though that this moment might seem like it has something to do with something that you haven't gotten over, it may be that you're at the point to where you either need to overcome it or to take a little different look at the situation to overcome it in that direction.
Right.
What we also know from a communal standpoint is that if you're truly about community, then everything that you suffer from isn't necessarily just for you. Right? Sometimes you suffer for the sake of other people. Sometimes what you bring about is the experience to help someone else who's going to go through the same type of experience,
right.
and know how to navigate through it. What did the late DMX said? If I gotta suffer for my dogs to see the light, they give me pain till I die, but please Lord treat them right. And I'm not saying.
No, but I get you. But no, that's a powerful. X was a very spiritual brother, man.
Yes, he was.
And speaking about spirituality and business, his spirituality is what fueled his music.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like I've heard other artists who had a more international impact, or I should say stardom than him, say X prayers were the most powerful things they've ever experienced in their life.
Exactly.
And that is the embodiment of spirituality and business.
And what he said in that quote is to really put in perspective, am I going through this just for me? Or is it just my pain? Or is it just my adversity?
Right.
And what spirituality allows for you to do is to know exactly, what stage of my development am I at? Am I doing this for the sake of it not being something so impactful to someone who I love? And for instance, I know your Uncle Al probably been through some things that, he may not have told you about,
right.
But you see the end product now.
Oh, yeah.
And when you see the end product, you know that you can do it.
Right.
And so it puts in perspective. Spirituality puts in perspective, why am I going through this thing? What is the bird's eye view of what it is that I'm going through? And is it something that really pertains to what I feel, or is it some other intellectual understanding of this thing, i.e. the intelligence, the intellectual, emotional intelligence that you have in a situation? I think for me, spirituality has always given me perspective. For me, spirituality has always given me a proper understanding of what the distant future may look like if I'm dealing with something that I never dealt with in the past, right. That I finally have to come and deal with right now, whether it be financial, whether it be in a relationship or anything else. That's what it does for me. That's what it does for me on a consistent basis. But I think, like we were talking about offline, a lot of times we have a certain level of adversity that really chips away at our self-confidence. But it's important for us to understand what adversity means in a spiritual context as opposed to our everyday reality. A lot of times when you were a child and you probably need to learn a lesson, one of the ways, this is positive punishment with the 4 ways of showing, but one of the ways of getting you to understand how to do something effectively or not do something is through adversity. It's through pain in some cases.
Yeah.
So you got to ask yourself, how do I learn things?
Right.
Do I learn from adversity?
Right.
Because they say in a lot of cases in the spiritual context is that, those intelligences that work with you, regardless of what you call it, if you call it an angel or if you call it an Orisha or anything that comes and speaks to you, are you going to hear the whisper? Or do they have to tap you on the shoulder? Or if you're a knucklehead, they got to hit you in the head with a sledgehammer.
Yeah, yeah.
So you start trying to formulate, why am I dealing with this?
Right.
And I think you got to really be open to all the possibilities of why we deal with certain things sometimes.
Right.
Did I get the lesson the last time?
Right.
Do I know better and I still did it?
Right.
Has the time come to where my 9 lives have really expired with the situation?
Right.
So those are all of the things that I think spirituality helps with. It puts things in perspective.
That's powerful. Now, with let's talk about the significance of group economics, but also the importance of community involvement in terms of empowerment and in terms of elevation, because you and your family and you guys are doing some powerful things in the community here in Atlanta, and like I said, I'm a fan of anybody who's all about building others. That's what I strive to do, and I feel like I know that you guys are doing that with the centers, which we'll take a visit by too, and kind of show and highlight throughout the show. But what's the significance, and how can we as a people all contribute to our community, and then the significance of that contribution to our community elevate and empower our community?
Well, we're dealing with some very interesting facts about how we utilize our dollars. If you look at a lot of other communities, they circulate their dollars on a frequent basis that takes, many exchanges before it leaves out of the community.
Right.
But I think we are at a stage now to where we got to really be definitive about what community is, who are the members of the community, and what it is that we are going to have institutionally in order to be able to move forward as a unit. One of the concepts that we always had in the Caribbean as well as over in the continent, or back on the continent, is a susu. And this is where people would collectively put money together and they would actually utilize the money for different reasons. This is the same context of understanding that our insurance company uses, the current insurance company uses, that created the insurance industry.
Yep.
Right? And so it's important for us to say that we have a community budgeting of sorts of why it is that we're putting the money together. And as an investor, one of the things I do is we're very clear about line iteming what exactly each dollar goes towards and being transparent about it. A lot of times when we do investing, and I'll tie it back into your question, but when we do investing, we have to clearly state this amount is going to this is going to that. This is my fee for doing this.
Right.
And being transparent about that. The other part of this from a community collective standpoint is to make sure that we're not being predatory with each other. Because we got so much other factors outside of us being predatory.
Yep.
And so when we start looking at being very specific with details, I believe, very, very specific with details. And we can't always get mixed up in the details to the point that we don't have this overview that we understand at the very least, that even if we have different avenues of getting there, one may be more effective than the other, but for this aspect of our community, they have to do it this way. And we're okay with that because we understand it. we have to be okay with that. The next thing is, I think we're very emotional people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And what I've learned and what I've seen inside of the business world as well as the investment world is that when I work with people outside of the community, they might not even know a person. And as long as they have a contract that outlines everything,
Yep.
the emotional interaction is not as important.
Yep.
I'm still grappling with how do we do that on an effective level as a community who's really just trying to heal from trauma.
Yep.
Because we are dealing with a lot of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And what my answer would be to that is that at the very least, we go back to, before signing anything,
Right.
look at the details, read, but inside of those details, we make sure that everyone is protected and it's a win-win situation for everybody. Just on, a personal level with doing business.
Right.
If we could duplicate that over and over with the community, and we're able to really start saying, this is exactly what it is that we're getting accomplished. We get that thing accomplished. We don't try to knock the ball out the park on the first swing.
Right.
We just make base hits with little things economically.
Right.
And at the same time, we'll be able to celebrate it, just the accomplishments, to say, yeah, this is a moment in time that we've accomplished just one of those small steps.
Right.
And we continue to do small steps in order to get to our goals. But I think we have to anticipate and know that the amount of interference that we may have by being successful is proportionate to how successful we are. Meaning, we talked about this before, the framework has already been there. We were very successful after Reconstruction as a people. We were very successful with building our own self-contained units of financial, economical, and community success, all the way from Rosewood to Black Wall Street, to Auburn Avenue in Atlanta, Central Avenue here in Tampa. We've been successful, but something happened. That thing that happened came from an outside source. So we have to make sure that we are stone clad in everything that we're doing to make sure that we don't have things that are devastating to our accomplishments. And we have to be able to maneuver in a way that says, just like in life, adversity will come, because I am a microcosm of my community. So adversity will come, just like we talk about in personal.
Mm-hmm.
But what kind of reaction or response are we prepared to deal with?
Mm.
Even in the line items, we've put, in every type of investment that I've done with real estate, at the bottom of each scope of work or in each budget, there's about 2 to 15% of miscellaneous contingencies that we just don't know. Mm. Something, we set aside money for things that we just don't know that is going to happen.
Right.
But that it's a possibility that it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, you almost anticipate it with how successful you are.
Right.
It's proportionate to how successful you are.
Right.
And a lot of times we go into things without having these concepts to stand as pillars to protect us.
Right.
So that's some of the question. There's a lot more to be massaged out and understood, but I always look at the community as I look at self.
Right.
Because I am an extension of community, and myself is an extension of community, and the community is an extension of who I am.
Right.
And so it's important for us to identify, to really be clear about, what community are we speaking of, and what aspects of goals are we going to get accomplished today? Mm. What are we going to get accomplished next week? What are we going to get accomplished in 5 years? And I think we have to be clearer on being definitive on what those details are to start off with. I think it's important.
That's powerful. And as you're speaking, I have about 5, 6 different metaphors and parables that kind of crystallizes what you were saying. And first starting with taking small steps. There's an old proverb that says you can't eat an elephant in one bite. So you take small little, steps. You can't climb a mountain in one leap or bound. You got to take small little steps to grow. And then when you talk about the microcosm and the macrocosm, you know, it's as above, so below, as within, so without. And then you talk about, let's just use water. You know, what aspect of the ocean is the raindrop? And is the raindrop still, you know, from the ocean? You know what I mean? So it's like all these different metaphors and parables that, you know, when you talk about nature, or you talk about astrology, you talk about business, you talk about spirituality, it's all interconnected, all interchangeable. And I think that's where we can wrap it up, because that was powerful, man. Like the whole entire exchange. I'm extremely excited about this show, because I feel like when you have a show that's based off of business, or you have a show that's based off of spirituality, kind of reverting back to what you said earlier, you know, from a certain mindset or a certain perspective, you think that they're two totally different opposite sides of polarity. But, you know, as this show has grown and kind of manifested its way through, but also within your life, how your path and your trajectory in life came to clarity and fruition, is like we see how Siamese they are. You know what I'm saying? We see how simultaneously they must work harmoniously in order for us to truly have a clear navigation in terms of life and business. And I'm excited about this show, brother, because I really feel like it's going to make an impact with people from all walks of life, but especially people within our community. And I feel like the information was so clear, but yet so broken down, so elementary, but yet so powerful, that I think it's going to really make a massive impact and a massive shift on the audience and the viewers and listeners who listen to it. So I definitely appreciate you taking the time, which was a lot of time, you know, out of your busy schedule to record this, man, because it's a conversation, or so many conversations that's needed, you know, within our community. And I feel like it's going to be extremely beneficial for, you know, a lot of people. And I'm looking forward to doing it again and again and again and again, and you know, just keeping it rolling, man. And with that, I kind of, before we wrap it up, I want to definitely make sure that you highlight all the products, goods, and services that you offer in terms of being a, you know, a coach, a consultant, community activist, you know, all the different hats that you wear. If you could kind of let the people know, you know, a little bit more in depth or detail how they can possibly contact you, reach out to you, or, you know, invest in your products, goods, or services that you bring to the marketplace.
Sure. And so my email address is kby360@gmail. And the KBY, of course, is my initials, but the 360 encompasses just how I look at the perspective of things. And, you know, some of the services really some of the services that I provide is, number one is investing. And usually we use the arm of real estate for investing. And what I do is really sit down and watch the trends and understand specific locations and areas. And for me, that really helps those who would like to invest. All investments have risks. We also do a lot of community work, as we talked about, and that taps into my heart chakra, basically, on making that connection with every aspect of who I am inside of others, especially if I know better and I can teach. We also do that. And of course, then there's this physical aspect. I'm a coach, a former strength and conditioning coach by trade. I probably do that the least now. Because it takes a lot of time, and when I commit to doing it, you really have to commit yourself to, from beginning to end, to take a person from where they are today to a destination later on. And I have to be very selective, because I get totally involved in the process.
Right.
So because I want them to succeed just as much as I want to coach them also, right?
Absolutely.
And so those are really the three prongs. And I think that those go into different aspects. But if you go to kby360@gmail, reach out to me, say that you've seen me on the show, and be specific about what you're asking for. Again, the questions.
Right.
The questions are so important, to be specific about what it is that you're asking for.
Right.
Because a lot of my solutions are in your questions.
Powerful. And with that, in closing, I'll also drop the link because the Airbnbs, in case people traveling to the Bay Area or Atlanta, if they want a spot to, to lay their head while they're in town, I'll drop the links in the comments in the comment section of the video for the Airbnbs.
Because I didn't know what those were. I don't know how to get to that, but definitely drop it in there.
Absolutely, okay. Yeah. So I'll drop all those links in there. And what about the center? Is there a way for them to, if they want to maybe have, get any type of involvement or?
So the center, it's at thjca.org is the nonprofit arm of the center. That's www.thjca.org. Or if you want to do any type of rentals, you can go to www.thjcaevents.com. www.thjcaevents.com. So those are the two avenues concerning, and that's a family organization. We've been doing work since 1993 up underneath those organizations. We're a staple here in the Tampa Heights community, and we consistently work towards ameliorating the situations that we see, but at the same time empowering those who also come in and who want to have to be a part of what it is that we're doing. So it's real important.
That's what's up. And I'll definitely have all those links dropped in the description and comment section as well. So with that, man, this is so far, not being biased to my other guests, I appreciate everybody for real, but this has been my favorite episode thus far with this particular platform because of the range in which I feel like the conversation went, but also because of, I feel like, all the lessons, that I feel like were shared within this particular interview as well. But man, I can't tell you, I appreciate you. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the energy and the intellectual libation that you have poured, amongst the audience and the viewers. So I appreciate it, brother, and we definitely got to do it again.
Yeah, anytime, let me know. Come back. And I know we've spoken in general terms, but all of these general terms have specific paths to walk.
Right.
And when you're ready to walk those paths, whether we want to do it here or do it in person, just let me know how we want to do it.
Facts. That's what's up. So that has been episode number 3 of the Prolific Perspective podcast. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Thank you for taking the time to check out the show. And as always, please hit the like, subscribe, and also if you got anything out of this or you felt that it served value to you, please share this video with somebody who you think would benefit from this episode. So thank you guys for tuning in. I'm your host, Andre Polite, and this is my guest, brother Kareem Young, also known as Oya Bele. I appreciate you, brother. So be it. It is done. Ashe. We out. Peace.